The reality is that law and order at all levels of society, not just internationally, are on trial today because the fundamental principle of justice is under a sustained attack.
Those words set the tone for the inaugural International Ahmadi and Muslim Lawyers Symposium at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London, held under the theme International Law on Trial, Justice in a Divided World.
International law is on trial. It's been on trial for many years, even ever since its inception, but it's under increasing strain because states have for many years violated international law, invaded countries, occupied territories, taken the resources of other nations. But what we see today is that many countries, but traditionally when they've done that, they've normally said, we are doing this lawfully. Here's an exception, here's our defence, we're still acting within the law. But what we see today is that nations are doing it openly, blatantly, and they're even saying statements, major powers, the strongest of powers, saying we don't need international law. And my own morality is enough for me. But that can take us into a very different position where might is right and there's no restraint on power.
More than 200 Ahmadi Muslim lawyers from across the world travelled to attend the inaugural symposium of the International Ahmadi Muslim Lawyers Association. To mark the event, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper, sent a special message which was read out by human rights lawyer Amjad Khan.
Today, you have chosen international law on trial, justice in a divided world as your theme. And while this topic is commendable, the reality is that law and order at all levels of society, not just internationally, are on trial today. This, as I have already made clear, is because the fundamental principle of justice is under a sustained attack. Thus, let it be clear that until true and absolute justice are established, there can be no lasting peace in the world. Therefore, it is my sincere request to all of you that in your deliberations today, you reach a consensus amongst yourselves, pledging to make whatever sacrifices are required in order to defend justice and to focus seriously and wholeheartedly on this mission.
You know, I was really impressed by His Holiness' message emphasizing this notion of justice. We need to bring justice to everyone. And His Holiness actually talked about everybody has a role to play in order to bring justice. We need that collaborative efforts. If we have justice, we can eliminate all of these discriminations. So I think we need to just push hard for His Holiness' message.
So this is a very powerful and strong message that needs to be known outside usual circles. It's very important because I never heard someone saying things like that. I think he's truly a pious man. And he knows that every word he says, God is looking at him. And he has a responsibility to be honest.
In my own experience, I have rarely come across this message being expressed so articulately. We need to be able to speak truth to power. And for me, that is a very powerful message that I hardly heard from political leaders or religious leaders before.
Hazur has called for the lawyers, not just Ahmadi lawyers, but everybody present, to make a pledge to fight for justice and for peace. And that's the pledge that we want to fulfill, inshallah.
Hazur Anwar Talib Aziz has put together a comprehensive message, almost a blueprint for how Ahmadi lawyers need to act. And what Hazur is saying is the actions can't happen tomorrow. They must happen beginning today. And so this is an urgency, and Hazur feels that lawyers, Ahmadi lawyers, we have a special obligation, as much as Ahmadi doctors or engineers, that we must go to the field and we must fight against religious repression wherever we see it, and we must uphold justice before it's too late.
The timing could not be more relevant, with international law in decline and global institutions breaking down. Academics, journalists, and United Nations officials discussed whether criminal law was still fit for purpose, the limits of free speech, and upholding minority and refugee rights.
And it is also true that what the United States is doing now is not new. It has antecedents in U.S. history. So again, I always push back. I said this earlier when people say this is un-American. No, there are deep roots of this, but it has reached a level in the United States that is historic in its absolute contempt for the idea of international law.
After all the harsh word we heard about how the UN is falling, and the problem is that this is absolutely true. The UN is dying, and it is a big problem. And I think the title of this symposium reflects this situation.
Meaning that we see these huge conversations, huge deliberations and treaties, but they all end up at the disadvantages of the global majority. Where they commit the loss and damage fund, it never suffices. We don't see it, but they preach billions and billions.
There are moments in history when the distance between law and reality becomes impossible to ignore. This is one of those moments. Today, the law is being tested not only in textbooks or courtrooms, but in rubble, displacement, and in the daily lives of civilians, asking the most basic question: does the law still protect us, or only describe our suffering?
Even international human rights mechanisms, painstakingly built over 80 years, fall short, since they are supported by an international legal order that is state-centered and built on the premise that states can be encouraged, persuaded, compelled to ultimately uphold international human rights standards and obligations.
So I think it is very important for majority communities to speak for the minorities who are persecuted. But unfortunately, that's not the case in the majority of the Muslim communities or the Muslim countries where the Ahmadiyya communities are a minority. And it should not be that way.
But from where I stand, this is not a collapse of a system that has ever worked. It is an exposure of a system that was always conditional. International law has long been violated by powerful states. We know this. There's many examples. The difference is not that they're breaking the rules. The difference now is that they're no longer bothering to pretend that the rules even apply to them.
I mean, let's take a major thing which is said, about the marches, the Free Palestine or Palestine shall be free, is put forward by and is made as a statement in Parliament. And I think the Prime Minister says this is an anti-Semitic statement. Now, I've spoken to lots of Palestinians about this, and also I think analysed it logically, that this is not an anti-Semitic statement.
Digital violence must be recognized as a real violence. And now the core challenge is not just adding new speech laws, but how we make sure that the existing legal principles actually effectively work online. A few things to consider. Enforcement is, always difficult, but particularly difficult online. So we need to make sure that they are applied more consistently and more clearly. And platforms, they need to be held accountable in a meaningful way.
And I think what one needs to do is to look at alternative rival models that really, because the UN is over and done with. Jin made the very good point that you've had the middle countries and you had the superpowers, and the middle countries were very, very frustrated, not being able to get anywhere. And quite frankly, with Khani's speech now, the mask has fallen and people have realized that really they've got to look at something new. The Islamic model is a very, very good one. Islamic refugee law, for example, always takes the view that the stranger is actually the person to be welcomed and to be treated with generosity, with open arms. And very few people talk about Islamic refugee law.
I've been called into Lund University 3 times, and they're going to get me in again, to work with students and staff who want to talk about Israel-Palestine and are being shut down. Students would like justice, they would like peace, they would like the killing to stop.
Deriving inspiration from great jurists in the past, attendees were shown a 10-minute video highlighting the great contributions of Hazrat Sir Muhammad Zafrullah Khan Sahib, Raziyallahu Anhu, an Ahmadi Muslim and the former president of the UN General Assembly.
Je déclare Son Excellence Sir Zafrullah Khan élu
président de la 17e session ordinaire de l'Assemblée générale.
Sir Zafrullah played an important role not only in the history of Pakistan, but also in the early period of decolonization that saw several nations in North Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia become independent nations. He was one of those statesmen who knew how to navigate the corridors of power at both the League of Nations and the United Nations. It also provides us with an insight into the moral integrity of Sir Zafrullah, who always stood up for what he believed was right, as we saw in that video, even if he had to stand against the whole world.
And also I thought that the section on Zafar Khan was amazing. I mean, because he's such a distinguished man. It's been rather erased in the history of Pakistan. And so to be reminded of him, and particularly in the context of that great apartheid judgment of the mid-60s, I found very interesting, by the ICJ, and of course, particularly at a time when the International Court of Justice is now contemplating the matter of a genocide in Gaza. I was absolutely riveted by that. I think it's been a first-class event.
Concluding the symposium, Jonathan Butterworth, chairman of the International Ahmadiyya Muslim Lawyers Association, echoed His Holiness's call for unity among nations in defense of justice, warning of the global consequences if international law continues to be undermined.
I will conclude with the following profound words from this morning's special message of His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad on the collective duties of humanity to avert another global war. His Holiness wrote, "Moving forward, those nations and individuals who genuinely wish to see justice should unite and have the courage to stand before the major powers in defense of truth and justice. Yet all signs point towards increasing warfare and destruction. As I have repeatedly warned, I believe we are heading rapidly towards a cataclysmic world war, in which conventional weapons shall be sidelined in favour of utterly inhumane and destructive weapons, capable of annihilating cities and entire nations."
Nosherwan Rashid, MTA News.